The following is an important detail because there is no concrete evidence on why the Etruscans were called Tyrrhenians and Tersenians, in addition to also being called Pelasgians, by the Greeks, during the time when it would have been relevant. Dionysius of Halicarnassus allegedly lived most of his life in the 1st century BC, which, according to the status quo, is centuries after the Etruscan Empire. However, if I am correct that the Etruscan Empire was essentially what we call the Roman Empire around the turn of the millennia, then the credibility of DH's claims may be amplified, given that there is evidence in the archaeological record that Rome was quasi-Etruscan all the way up to the 1st century BC, and artifacts with Etruscan writing were still being created in that region. According to Wiki, Aulus Metellus was an Etruscan senator in the Roman Republic, originally from Perugia or Cortona. The Aulus Metellus sculpture was found in 1566, with the exact location being debated. I will also remind people that, while I acknowledge the advancements of archaeology being the reason so many new discoveries were made, there must also remain the suspicion of forgery. I can tell by the use of certain letters that the inscription is Umbrian, i.e., the letter that looks like 8 signifies F, or PH. According to DH, the Etruscans were named Tyrrhenians and Tersenians after towers. He wrote, as regards these Tyrrhenians, some declare them to be natives of Italy, but others call them foreigners. Those who make them a native race say that their name was given them from the forts, which they were the first of the inhabitants of this country to build. For covered buildings enclosed by walls are called by the Tyrrhenians as well as by the Greeks terces or towers. So they will have it that they received their name from this circumstance in like manner as did the Mosynici in Asia. For these also live in high wooden palisades resembling towers, which they call Mosines. Jacob Bryant believed the towers that served multiple purposes, for navigators and the like, were made by a race of people called the Ammonians. He derives the roots of words in most Western languages from their radicals, and thus named them Ammonian radicals. However, I suspect many of these ideas, when accurate, originated from the cultures in Italy. They were primarily of a Celtic, or Central European, phenotype. Their navigators brought it to the regions of the Eastern Mediterranean, Western Asia, and North Africa. I do not think a race of shepherds, whose history is primarily dependent on the Bible, which has no evidence of being produced during the eras it is claimed to account for. Nonetheless, the towers Bryant attributes to the Ammonians may actually be a product of the Etruscans. Bryant wrote, Analysis. ANC Myth. pp. 399-400. They built upon every hill and promontory, where they had either commerce or settlement, obelisks, and towers, which they consecrated to some deity. These served in a twofold capacity, both as sea marks by day, and for beacons by night. And as people in those times made only coasting voyages, they continually went on shore with offerings, in order to gain the assistance of the god, whoever there presided. For these towers were temples, and oftentimes richly furnished and endowed. They were built sometimes on artificial mounds, but generally on natural eminences, that they might be seen at a great distance. They were called by the Ammonians, who first erected them, Tar, and Tor, Bochart Geeg Sacra. L1. C. 228. Page 524. Of Tuar, the same as the Tuar of the Chaldees, which signified both a hill and tower. Again, this is problematic because the Chaldean alphabet, which is claimed to beget the Hebrew one, comes from Phoenician, which is claimed to come from Pelasgian, and the Etruscans were called Pelasgians, as well as Tyrrhenians and Tersenians, by the Greeks. This is why certain Phoenician words, such as Amorn, can be purely read in Etruscan as Omn. Also, recall that Tyre, the alleged capital of Phoenicia, is written, TSR, pronounced Sir. Bryant continued, ib page 400. They were oftentimes compounded, and styled Tories, or fire towers, on account of the light, which they exhibited, and the fires, which were preserved in them.
Here came the terris of the Romans, and the tiris, tirsis, tirsos, of the Greeks.
The latter, when the word Tor occurred in ancient history, often changed it to Tauros, a bull, and invented a number of idol stories in consequence of this change. I'm not sure where this fits in, but in some locations, the only certain remains of the Etruscan cities or habitations are their walls, mythologized and referred to as Cyclopean by the Greeks. Theodore Mommsen wrote, Hist. Rome. Volume 1. Page 235. What are called Cyclopean ring walls frequently occur in Italy, especially in Etruria, Umbria, Latium, and Sabina, and decidedly belong in point of design to the most ancient buildings of Italy. Again, Ib page 236. The true polygonal masonry is found in Etruria only at Pergi and at the towns, not very far distant from it, of Cosa and Saturnia, and as the design of the walls of Pergi, especially when we take into account the significant name, towers. He neglects to mention the Etruscan or Latin word for towers, but he suspected the Etruscans learned this type of architecture from Tiryns in Argolis, spelled in so-called ancient Greek. However, Tiryns has the same phonetic root as the subject at hand. Citadel of Tiryns. If the chronological and historical records were accurate, this would be a reasonable conclusion. However, it has been demonstrated that by various writers, whether intentionally or not, that the chronological and historical records are not accurate. Bryant continued, Ib page 400. The Arphite god Osiris, the same as Apollo, was by the Ammonians styled Ophel and Opel. No inscriptions were provided, and there was upon the Sinus Persicus a city Opis, where his rites were observed. There seems likewise to have been a temple sacred to him, named Tor Opal, which the Greeks rendered Tauropolis.
Strabo speaks of Satseian oracular temple, and says that it was in the island Icaria towards the mouth of the Tigris, Nison Icarion, και Ieron Apollonos Agion en αυτή, και Mandion Tavropolou. There was a sanctuary of Apollo with a temple and oracle of Tauropolis in it, on the island of Icaria.
Strabo.
L16, p. 1110.
Here, instead of Osiris, or Mithras, the serpent deity, the author presents us with Apollo, the manger of bulls. Bryant continued, Ib pp 401-2. Colchis was styled Cutea, and had been early occupied by the sons of Cheus. I do not accept this as true, but I'm including it to show how Bryant suggested the misinterpretation of this word led to a fable. The chief city, whence the country has been in general denominated, was from its situation called Chalchus, and Colchus, the hill or place of Cheus. This by the Greeks was rendered Colchis, but as travellers are not uniform in expressing foreign terms, some have rendered what was Colchian and Chalcian, and from Colchis they have formed Chalcos, brass. The Chalcian towers being moreover interpreted bulls, a story took its rise about the brazen bulls of Colchis. Besides this, there was in these towers a constant fire kept up for the direction of ships by night, whence the bulls were said to breathe fire. Revisit this inner world episode regarding this subject. As a brief aside, there may be a philological interchange between En and A regarding Tarit and Tarnit, as Ben and Bar both signify son in Hebrew and are written Bn and Br, respectively. So it may behove you to revisit fresh batch number 136 and recall the significance of Tarnit to the Etrusco-Phoenician mariners before continuing. To learn more about the ancient universal system and its implications on the historical and chronological records, which are contrary to what modern academia teaches, invest in the Spirit World series and the Real Universal Empire. Become a member to access the rest of this article.